So, moving on in that same vein, without a doubt, unity and diversity is a burning topic of our time. As we take a hard look at the complexities and nuances of our society, it's clear that real change doesn't just start with acknowledging diversity, but actively including people. Our next session is a groundbreaking panel discussion on the topic, Inclusion is the Key to Making Diversity Work. All right, so help me to welcome to the stage. Our moderator for this conversation is Jeannie Caesar Fabian, who is the Chief Legal Officer and Head of Private Equity at Enzo Advisors. And she'll be joined by panelists Jessica Atkinson, who we heard from before from WILB Effect, Paul J. Criscuolo, who is Partner and General Counsel of Callagy Law. We have Jona S. Lemmonds, who is the founder and CEO and Managing Director of Launch Your Inner Wealth. And Jim Briggs, who is the founder of GOB Network. And also Natasha Reshma Pooran, Assistant District Attorney of the Queens District Attorney's Office in New York. Welcome, panelists.
Just wanted to make a slight adjustment. Caesar, or Jeannie Caesar, who was supposed to moderate due to the weather, wasn't able to make it. However, I'd like to ask Litsa Bowden to help us with the moderation today and also give her the opportunity to introduce herself to us and thank her for her quick hit.
Okay, now it's working. Okay. So I'm Litsa Cristina Bowden. I am the CEO of Shining Lights Counseling and also a board of director member of the WILB Effect. So I'll be moderating today. Last minute job, but it's okay. We're gonna keep it moving. So the topic is inclusion is the key to making diversity work, right? So we're going to start this conversation with the question of how is inclusion different from diversity and why is it important? So I know, Jessica, you have spoken to many different companies around their organizational change and improvement in your work. So can you please tell us how is inclusion different from diversity and why is it important?
Hello, everybody. Definitely welcome to the conversation. We'll do introductions after I answer this question. But yes, definitely excited that organizations have made the investment through their ESG efforts to really expand the racial and ethnic mix within their organizations. And that is diversity, right? That different people are in the room just like today, right? And that is the first step, right? Is the ability or to have everyone present. So what we're here today to talk about, because there's been so many conversations about how do we increase the diversity of or the difference of the people, right? But let's talk about once you have them there, how do we create an inclusion of those people into the workplace environment, into the infrastructure? And so to use a different word, inclusion means to allow those voices to be heard. And I really want to take a step back here because this lays the foundation for this conversation today. Inclusion is the way you listen, right? So the bottom level of listening is pity. Man, I'm sorry to hear that happen to you, right? And that is a form of being aware and have heard someone, right? But then the second level would then be sympathy. It's like, well, man, you know, I feel bad that that happened to you, right? So it's bad that happened to them. Now it's bad it happened to you. That's sympathy. Empathy is when you believe what they said, right? Because just because you feel bad for them, just because you understand they feel bad, the empathy is when you believe that how they feel and you believe that what happened actually exists. This is a layered form of how to get there. The last step is compassion. And compassion is this ability to actually take action. I'm sorry that happened to you. I can't believe, I feel bad that you're going through that. Let's figure out what we can do. This is inclusion. So I will turn it back over, but I hope that helps to guide this conversation here today a little bit.
So now that we have the base, I'm going to have all the panelists introduce themselves so that we could get a better perspective on their answers. So we're going to start beside me and go down the line.
Thanks. My name is Jim Biggs. I'm the founder of a educational nonprofit platform called the GOB Network, where we use real estate as a tool to teach financial literacy and how to create generational wealth and passive income.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jona Lemmonds, and I'm actually very, very glad that we're sitting together because that's sort of the space I'm in. It's a lot of the financial and investing literacy, which then really represents the ideals of inclusion. And so we started it as a, obviously, nonprofit when you're educating. It's called Launch Your Wealth. And today I've founded Ashtree Capital, which is actually rooted from our family's history. So I'm in the finance, real estate, but more importantly, I think I'm here for the educational and really the mission and vision. And so this really resonates with me. So thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. I am Natasha Pooran, and I am a prosecutor from New York. So I think I might be the only government attorney here, and I'll be talking a little bit about the public sector today. And I am also, in my role as a prosecutor in New York, I also do diversity and inclusion for the New York State Bar criminal justice section, so prosecutors and defense attorneys. I work on D&I efforts in that regard.
Excellent, thank you. I will be brief for those of you that were here about a half an hour ago when I was on another panel. Paul Criscuolo, I'm a tax transactional partner with Callagy Law, which is a full-service law firm operating throughout the U.S. We've got offices in 5 states. I am also general counsel of the law firm, and I am general counsel of our affiliated company, Unblinded, which does professional coaching, training, and development in the space of, again, professional growth and building your business.
Hello, everyone. Jessica Atkinson also spoke on a previous panel, but we definitely have a little bit of a different audience. So I'm the CEO of the WILB Effect. Essentially, we have 2 main product lines. One is project management built on a return on investment model that we help all organizations in different industries be able to build out how to get from A to B from a transformation perspective, be it business or in the technology space. I also have another component, which is public speaking and workshops for women's empowerment, and also for topics like this, where we talk how to create mental health and safe spaces within the workplace. So as leaders or people leaders, we are often first responders for our employees, right? About their immediate trauma or situation that's happening, and my company helps with that. My background is 20 years in corporate America and project management from a people leader internationally offshore, and I also am a human rights advocate and work to foster marriage equality globally. So thank you.
Okay, so piggybacking on the first question of, how is inclusion different from diversity? I want to ask, what have you seen in terms of the general systemic challenges or misconceptions that company leaders may face when striving to improve their firm diversity practices? I know it's a lot, right? Loaded question.
For me, I think we're going in order. All right, systemic. I think that is the bottom line, right? Is understanding that the infrastructure is built at a time when many different races or ethnicities did not have certain rights or privileges. So we qualify that, or the term that we use is systemic. What we hope to all achieve here today, right, is how to overcome these systemic realities, right? How can we forge past them and bridge better foundations for the people that help run our organizations and for ourselves? So when I think about some of the misconceptions is that when we look at inclusion is to think that if we have a diverse group, that all of a sudden, then we are being inclusive. I let you in the door, therefore you're included, right? And to really break this down and understand that inclusion is the voice, right? Is your reaction to what can be said, and does that person have a power to move the needle in a certain direction? So what I want everyone to take away, again, is this voice of inclusion means how do we impart and bring in these voices? So as a project manager, I can go on a call and there's 20 people on a project team, and I say, hey guys, anybody have any risk or issues? The loudest voice says, yeah, this. And there's all the quiet people that say nothing, right? Retaliation might be the reason they say nothing, right? They may have strong opinions and they're worried about their job. Like, there's all these reasons they don't speak up. So what we want, so inclusion is the ability to create the safe space for that voice to be heard and for us to really believe and then to respond, right? So a good project manager may take an extra step to maybe go around and ask everybody, hey, do you have a risk? Okay, you don't, and to like confirm that from each person to really encourage those voices to be heard. So I wanted to highlight that.
So, Jona, how do these issues affect professional?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in real
go
quick
ahead.
because I think Jessica framed the issue so perfectly. There is a difference between diversity and actual inclusion, right? Diversity gets you through the door. That doesn't necessarily mean you get a seat at the table. So there is a clear distinction between both of them, and you gave such beautiful access to listening earlier. And that's what we, part of the framework on what we coach and train on at Unblinded, we call it level 5 listening. And that's truly listening to someone, not only what they're saying, but what they're not saying, right? So I won't dive through all the examples, but level 1 listening would be the following. I like the New York Yankees. Your response would be, oh, I like the Mets, right? That's level 1 listening. You're not connecting congruently and deeply with the person. There's obviously 5 levels to where you get, not only are you hearing what they're saying, you're hearing what they're not saying. And I think Oprah framed it so perfectly. Oprah said the reason she held the microphone for 25 years and thousands of people is for one simple reason. I see you, I hear you, and what you say matters to me. And I think that, Jessica, was what you were driving into on truly listening to people and hearing what they're saying and what they're not saying and connecting with them deeply.
That's great.
That a little bit. To piggyback off of my fellow speakers, that is the biggest thing I think anyone can take away from this panel in response to what are people, once they get to the table, what are they not saying? What are they not saying? The next step is what efforts can any company take, any organization take, to have their voice be heard even when they themselves are not speaking? And what is the reason that they are not speaking? Is it that they are afraid of retaliation? Is it that they have a different opinion than those already at the table because they come in with a different perspective and they're afraid to be the lone wolf? That's a common one. They come from a very different background, with a different perspective, and then they're afraid to say theirs because it may not fit in with what is already at the table. And one way I think it's been, in my experience, been impactful and been helpful is to often sort of set up what Jessica mentioned, these types of safe spaces exactly for those non-conversations. And what that looks like per organization is going to always be a little different, but it's important to have, it might be some types of organizations within organizations, some in the public sector and other firms like to have set up sort of, I call them student councils, but where, for instance, an Asian American organization or a South Asian organization, and they'll sort of gather together and they can sort of let their voices be heard through that. So even when they're not speaking up or they're afraid to speak up, their voice can still be heard from at that silent table.
I'd like to speak on that as well.
Go ahead.
You know, the inclusion, I like the way that it was highlighted, so thank you all. I just wanted to add on that for me, where I stand with inclusion in the workplace, corporate, whether we look at it as micro and macro, corporate, entrepreneurship, financial, wealth, all of those things in the ecosystem that really enables us to function as human beings. It's in the ideas. You know, I don't see the color or the race, perhaps, maybe it's contrarian to that. And I can dive deeper into that as we go into this. But I just wanted to say that, you know, with the ideas, respecting the beliefs, and it's not so much of working so hard to push a mission in our companies, in our businesses, in the way we function, in the services that we offer, or our professional roles in our duties, such as, you know, for example, in your role, you know, with what you do as a prosecutor. I really believe that it's in the ideas and the experience that we can offer to create an opening to that inclusion idea. So I just wanted to compliment all of you on that.
So everybody's saying create that space for your employees, right? And also read the room as you are a manager or CEO of the company, read the room, see, you know, pay attention to your employees so you can see what's affecting them, why they're not speaking. That's all important. So Jona, how do these issues affect professionals from underrepresented communities in the context of their ability to build wealth through investments? So there are such disparities in generational wealth across various demographics. What is the impact there? And how can companies become part of the solution?
Ooh, that's a heavy question,
Yes.
without going politically incorrect, because I have a lot to say on that from the time that I've been in this space, 20 years plus, minus maybe the time that I decided to be a mom, but working and learning has never really stopped. So I'm going to be politically incorrect, so I apologize ahead of time, but I say that sincerely. I think with the generational wealth, the underserved, the underrepresented, the underbanked. That was one of the things that really pushed me in 2020 during the pandemic. It really gave me a lot of clarity to understand, and I'm still understanding it today. I've just really been blessed to be in a, support system where my family, my kids, as part of the inspiration, and maybe not everyone will have that, experience. But for me, when I look at families, when I look at the hardworking Americans that go out there and they work in construction, which is, by the way, it's a high-paying job, Jim, right? You know that. But they work so hard. So when you're talking about generational wealth, and we're not opening the doors to really represent what they could be earning, what they could be getting as far as services, kind of going beyond what it looks like outside of what they maybe are looking at, the impression. And I'll give an example to it just to kind of conclude my reply to that. I was wondering to myself, when you see commercials and billboards about banking services, one thing that really hit me is I don't see families, I don't see people in a realistic way to really promote what is banking, what could it mean to that person that is in construction, what can it mean to that person that has maybe 6 kids like myself, or what could it mean to someone that maybe they're not in the best job, but they want to bank with that bank or make more money or maybe learn how to invest their money. And so I really feel like there's some barriers still left over, and it takes like Jim's work and perhaps my work to kind of push some of those conversations and presence on social media, but also creating that safe space, which is apparently what we're all kind of coming in with a takeaway here. And really the generational wealth has to begin with the education. The politically incorrect form of my response would be, we're not going to win against Federal Reserve. We're not going to win against the politicians that is running these systems. We're not going to win against these governments because that's their role. But the good side about that, which is shifting our perspectives as entrepreneurs, as innovators, as leaders, as business owners, as company CEOs, and we get to make those decisions from a leadership standpoint, from a management standpoint, which is really focusing on the inner part of the system that we can create and build. Because Federal Reserve is privately owned. So we're not at their table to make those decisions. So when they decide to increase inflation, when they decide to bring us, this new centralized, digitized currency that perhaps maybe can pose as a danger later on, there's just so many question marks. And so I think we need to look at it from the inner workings that we can do what we're good at, of course, never focus on what we're weak at, because I think there's always so many human beings out there that's going to be more talented, more intelligent than we are, and I think creating that safe space, the representation that we can create, especially in the investment and wealth creation sector, will really, really be the beginning of a new change. Until then, we have to accept the fact that we can't rely on other systems that's not going to be on our favor. So I think when it comes to wealth, just to conclude on that, we have to look at the representation more than anything, because that will create that welcome to even take a step to that door of whatever you're opening it for. So that would be my response to that.
Anybody want to add anything else to that?
I would just mention, since we bring up generational wealth into the conversation, that really highlights another part of this, which is the equity, right? And we've all heard the statistics, right? White women, women in general, right? 70 cents on the dollar. Black women, 62 cents on the dollar. Hispanic, going down, lower. We've all heard those, right? So if general wealth, this is just math, right? If we're not able to be paid the same value for the same work, we're not going to have the same ability to increase and to strengthen our generational wealth. That's just math. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that a little bit as another portion of the complexity.
Yeah, I'll also chip in a little bit. There's certain things that as society we talk a lot about, and we talk about how complicated the issues are, how nuanced the issues are, and how hard it is to make changes. And if you think about poverty, that would be a classic example of things that we have not figured out. We don't seem to have good answers on fixing and is very systemic. But if you're wanting to talk about diversity, I think that's a very different conversation than inclusion. I think inclusion, we spend too much time trying to make it a complicated issue. It's not a complicated issue. We just simply have to decide that we're going to do it. And I know I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm trying to say that as, one of the, on a panel talking about diversity, I'm probably the last person that should be up here. But it's people that look a lot like me that just need to make that decision. This is not hard to figure out.
So Jim, have you seen these challenges play out in your business, and how have you addressed inclusion within your company's culture and practice? How has this changed?
So for me in particular, who I am and what I look like are two very different things. I represent the classic old white European male in the boardroom. But I was born in Tennessee and grew up in orphanages and foster homes. I'm very, very lucky to be where I am today. But in my personal business, I've worked as an entrepreneur most of my life, but I have been in corporate America for probably 12 to 15 years of my adult life. And I've always been drawn to the people that were like me. They may not have looked like me, but they thought like me. They came from similar backgrounds as me. And I had more in common with them, even though I didn't look like a lot of them. And then when I married into a culture that, into the Latin culture that, again, I felt I had more in common with. And I'm still, even where I am today, my brain is still just a poor hillbilly kid that's barefoot running around gravel roads in Tennessee, even though I'm lucky to not be there. And my companies, personally, on my existing board of directors for the GOB network, I'm the only old white guy there. We have a lot of color, a lot of women, and look, we know growing up, the people that nurture us, the people that are the most caring, the most understanding, are not our dads. Our dads who we go to when we need a kick in the ass to get going. But when we are the type of person that needs to be pulled along, cajoled, giving a pat on the back, it's always our moms. And we don't have enough of that in corporate America. And we don't have, and it's really not hard for us to do. I don't understand why there is the difference. There's not a good excuse for it, other than just taking a deep, hard look inside at ourselves. And have we made progress? Yeah, absolutely. But why? Why does it need to take this long? And the sad news, folks, as much progress as we've made in my lifetime, we're going backwards. Some of the recent decisions on the courts, we're going backwards. And if we don't wake up as a greater society and take more action and be more active in voting and being part of the solution instead of just being too busy to care, being too busy running our own lives, being too busy running our own businesses, then we're going to lose that. And we've already lost momentum. We need to get some of it back.
Anybody want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just a quick point. I want to acknowledge Jim on that and the wonderful discussion around it. I mean, to Jim's point, it's not difficult, but it does require some realization and true understanding of the issue, and then the ability to address the issue. So, for example, you may, and I've seen it, I've worked at Big Four consulting firms, I've worked at a law firm, I've represented clients, big, small, and everywhere in the middle. So even those that are intending to be diverse and inclusive, I'll give you an example. So while they may have a diverse and inclusive culture, for example, if a woman has a child and goes on a flexible work arrangement to help care for that child, is she still getting the training that she needs to get to compete with everyone else in the business, right? Again, it's not hard, but you need to be present to those issues. So you may say, I have a diverse and inclusive culture, but if you're not present to the issue that if people go on a flexible work arrangement, they may not get the same opportunities to train, develop, and advance as others, it's very easy for those people to fall through the gap. So to Jim's point, yes, wonderful acknowledgement of that, Jim, that yes, it's not difficult, but it does require a realization as to truly what the issue is and being present to it. And I think we have gotten better at it as a culture and society, but it's certainly far from perfect.
Great example. So Paul, how do these issues differ from outside counsel? What are some challenges that may be unique to law firms when seeking to improve diversity practices all around? What strategies has your firm implemented to ensure that its employees from all backgrounds and experiences are fully included in firm opportunities and activities?
Thank you for the question. Wow, there is a lot there. So let me start with this in some of the challenges, not only in our law firm, but that I've seen in other law firms. Many law firms have a very challenging and competitive culture and environment. I'm sure many of you have heard the up or out framework of a lot of law firms. That's you keep advancing in your career or you're out. Now, again, a lot of the ability to make your way up depends on the training you get. Not only the training you get, the assignments you get, right? If you're not truly in an inclusive and diverse environment, people may not be getting the same opportunities to the same client engagements that will help them advance. So I've certainly seen it in the law firm culture. Again, I think we've gotten better at it as a society by becoming present to the issue and making sure that the opportunities are there. Again, not perfect, but making sure the opportunities are there so that everyone has the same opportunities to learn, develop, grow as a culture and within the firm. But it is still a competitive and challenging environment. That is why I don't think this will come as a shock to many. If you polled the top 100 law firms in the United States and simply went on their web pages and looked at the partners at those law firms, the majority are going to be white males. It's just, now if you compare that to, I think, 20, 25 years ago, there's a big change, but again, it's far from perfect. We have made, it's interesting because from my perspective, I wear two hats. I wear the law firm side of it, and then I wear the unblinded coaching training side of it. The unblinded coaching training side of it is wildly diverse and inclusive, and I'm probably the minority within that organization. On the law firm side of it, it's probably the reverse. If you go on our page, you're going to find that most of our partners are white males. Interestingly enough, if you scroll down, most of our what I'll call our staff and our trusted advisors is what we call them, are females and minorities. And we've worked very hard to create opportunities for those people to advance to the partnership level. And we're getting almost to close to a 50-50, but we're working very hard to do that. We're actually just acquiring another law firm, which is it's a family law practice, and they're all female. which is wonderful. And actually the leader of that practice is an African-American woman who leads that practice. So that's going to, by implication, make us more diverse. But again, you have to be present to it. And if you're not only present to it, but actively addressing the issue day to day within your culture, there's not going to be a change.
And I'm just going to piggyback off of that because my colleague just spoke about the law firm culture, and I just want to add on to that, as it's certainly the same within the public sector as well. This, not to the exact level of up and out, but the level of advancement and the level of maybe disparity unknowingly or unwittingly, but in assignments, cases that people have. And as my colleague just spoke about, a lot of it requires recognition. Recognition is step one, acknowledgement second, and then action third. Because really, we just need to sort of take action towards it. Once the recognition happens, then you might realize that that certain people have different assignments that are disparate from others, different cases, and really how far are minorities and different ethnicities and women advancing. Advancement is the biggest key. How are minorities able to make managerial positions, or if you look around boss meetings, are they all representative of one race or ethnicity or one gender? And once you look at these top levels, these managerial positions, in order to really be diverse, again, they need to be inclusive. So for the inclusion, the difference between diversity and inclusion, I think.
So I want to add another thing to that, which is, I said it's really not hard to figure out. You just need to make the decision you're going to be inclusive. But having said that, and picking up on what Paul had said, sometimes the rules to the game are rigged against you. So no matter how many minorities or women we allow into the boardroom or into the C-suite, if the game is rigged against them, then they're going to have a very difficult time winning, no matter how inclusive we may want to look. So if part of winning the game is always moving up or moving out, always being the last at the office, always being the one who's willing to pick up and move to a new location at the drop of a hat, those are all rigged against women, and they're all rigged against family. So we may need to take a look at changing the rules to the game and not promoting based upon what we see as being the qualities that we think are most important in our leadership structure.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want we're all here, hopefully, to learn how we can work towards this inclusion. So we have a diverse crowd, in a sense, even an international group. However, I want to highlight specific to the U.S. Just because we have an at-will contract does not mean we have to have at-will workplaces. Right? And I pause because I feel like that needs to sink in, because that's the systemic, right? Just because we have at-will contracts does not mean we have to have at-will workplaces. And that is what we have to ask ourselves. What can I do each day? How can I bring myself into my environment as a leader, as a people leader, as this is my organization, as an individual contributor, and ensure the actions and the way I listen isn't in a at-will spirit. Statistics say that women do 20% more busy work. And when I say busy work, then men, in a sense that it's work that doesn't lead to promotional opportunity. Why? Where does that come from? Right? I can remember being at the table, and they're like, "Hey, Jess, take the notes." I'm like, "Dang, man, thought I was getting somewhere. I'm the secretary," right? You understand? Like that's what's happening, right? That's the inclusion piece. They let me show up, but I have to take the notes, right? I think I want to impart that this inclusion, it's also similar to a panel earlier on mentorship. The inclusion is about, as I advocate as a leader for inclusion, how am I addressing microaggressions? Some of us you may not know what that is. That means, I'll give a personal example. It's simple. It could be something simple, right? Maybe I'm speaking passionately. Oh, yes, you're screaming. Okay, all right. My boss is sitting right there. He doesn't have a problem with it, but you want to say something, right? That's microaggressions. Or it's other things like, okay, all right, maybe I'm not at the country club, right? But that's always the conversation, like, hey, are you going to be there on Saturday? Da, 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 right? And I'm not in that. Those little pokes that I'm not in the spaces, really, right? So I'm just in the space, but I don't really have a voice, right? We have unconscious bias. You didn't mean to do it, but I'm as a female with a male boss, I'm not measured on my performance by my metrics. I'm measured by my attitude, right? These are the things, because I want to be very clear when we leave here. What can I do differently, right? It's gaslighting. And gaslighting could be an example. Every single day, as a boss, you come in and you got some feedback. Every day. You poking and prod, that's what we're talking about, gaslighting, false narratives, right? I think Jim highlighted false narratives that you need to, work all day, every day, on weekend, check your emails. Yeah, that's not true, right? I'm gonna get my most creative moments when I breathe. Right? When I go outside and catch a little sun, that's when I'm going to be like, ooh, the light bulb's not turning on and being in a meeting. If they're meeting, 90% of us probably, if I ask you, so what's your day-to-day like? Oh, I'm in meetings all day. I have a rule. My meetings are 25 minutes or 55 minutes. We all need to, get some coffee or take a potty break, right? And I'm a hero because of that. They're like, man, just get 5 minutes. Right? But this is the real stuff. What is inclusion? Right? So I had to bring up these more, sensitive pieces, microaggressions, unconscious bias, imposter treatment. Right? I'm not even going to jump into it, but I'm just going to say imposter treatment. We have imposter syndrome. That's after you got beat up from all the other ones I just named. Then you feel like you don't belong there, and then you start to speak into existence and start to act that reality. That is a different issue. And we also should be advocating for how do we empower our employees to move past imposter syndrome, right? Because it's a fear, a false fear. Right? And it can be changed. But I just couldn't get away with making sure, like, do you know what you can do for this thing called inclusion? Those are the things that you can work with your teams to address. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so I know, Natasha, you mentioned earlier that you're part of the public sector. How would you describe the challenges faced by public agencies in ensuring not only strong diversity, but effective inclusion for all attorneys working on the public's behalf?
That is a loaded question.
All my questions are loaded, as y'all seen.
You like giving loaded questions. I touched upon it earlier, and as did this whole panel. So I think it has gotten better, but to what Jessica just said, I cannot count the number of times where I thought I got somewhere. I got promoted, showed up, only to be told, well, here's your assignment. Looked at the assignment, and it's not at all like what my colleagues have. It's who are in the same exact situations as me, same amount of experience, same amount of, we got promoted at the same time, but our cases are 2 different levels. Our assignments are all very, very different. And it has gotten better, but this unconscious bias is prevalent, which is why, again, to the sort of recognition, acknowledgement, and taking action. And I think that goes for the public sector as well as the private sector. You see it in firms, you see it in the public sector, you see it with attorneys in general. And just creating opportunities, training, and opportunities for advancement to sort of unrig the game a little bit. The odds are just completely stacked against a lot of individuals. I think the best analogy I can use is sort of, some of you may have heard this before, you have a classroom full of children, and the children are given pieces of paper and told to shoot hoops into a trash can. Well, there are students in the first row and there are students in the last row. The students in the first row, the game is rigged towards them. They're closest to the trash can, they can throw the ball into the piece of paper into the trash can. The kids in the back, they can, if they have a really good throw, they can manage it. But odds are, they're just not missing. They're just missing the target. And I like to use that analogy for companies, for organizations in general. Can we unrig that setup with the classroom so as that everybody has equal trainings, equal work, equal assignments, everybody's voices are being heard, so everybody has a great opportunity to hit the target.
And so we have a few more minutes, so the last question is for anybody in the panel that wants to answer. How can companies ensure that diversity perspectives are not only heard, but valued in decision-making processes? Is this something that can be achieved through initiatives, or does it require changing hearts and minds about the value of inclusion as a tool to improve competitiveness and performance? Yes, another loaded question, and the final loaded question. Anybody want to take a hit at this?
I'll answer that quite simply. Yes. It's all of them, right?
Great.
It's yes.
All of the above.
Yes.
I second that, Paul. It's a yes to all the above.
Thirded.
We need to train and motivate people to change minds, but we also need to legislate for the people that won't have their minds changed.
That's good.
Oh, I can just say what it's not, right? I love that. It's like, oh, just coming with it. NPS scores and surveys. That is not inclusion, right? Because often that NPS by the time you drop down your manager and drop down your department and then make your feedback, they know exactly who it is. No one's given any feedback that we can actually move substantially the needle, right? So I just want to throw that out. What it's not is the survey that you sent out that says we're good and we're making progress. It's not that.
I'm just going to add on to that from personal experience. When I look at company websites, and this has actually been part of my research development, and in the finance, real estate, and more serious spaces like private equity and mergers and acquisitions, the truth is we are a minority as women. So I'm like a minority of a minority. And so when you're talking about teaching the mindset, my question is, should we have to? And when I look at company websites to do research on what's going on in the organization. Can I relate with them? Are they representing me, a part of my voice as a minority? The real truth is that, in keeping it real, is that it's going to take a while. We have a long ways to go, and I like what you said. I think the representation, but also the legislation side of it, the systematic side of it, but focusing on what we can do as far as all of us, like representing what we do in our businesses. And I think, to conclude on what I wanted to share, is that when I see in the board of directors mainly men, no offense to the men, because I work with a lot of men, from investors to decision makers, it's time for new ideas. And it's to pique the thought that, are women's ideas not good enough? So that was part of what really triggered me in a way to do research and continue to relate that with the work that I'm doing today with Ashtree Capital. It's not just a real estate investing in that ecosystem. We have a mission, we have a vision, and part of that is taking not only women, not only the minority, not only with the underserved, underbanked, and underrepresented, but it's creating tools and resources and opening those doors. And so I think we do have a long ways to go, the education, the mentoring, and really sharing voices like this. So thank you for having me. Thank you for that.
Thanks, everybody, for
Fantastic.
time.
Great note to end on. Thank you, panelists, for your insightful words.